Hello and welcome to this podcast from the Irish Linen Centre and Lisburn Museum. My name's James, I'm the Research Officer at the museum, and I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Polton, all the way from New Jersey, USA. Today we are going to be speaking about the Barbour family in America. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much. It's wonderful to be here.
So, Richard, tell us a bit about yourself, your career, interest in local history. You'll be talking to us about the Barbours tonight at our talk. So just a bit about yourself, Richard.
Sure. I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. I have always had an interest in the history of the city. My family has lived in Paterson since the 1890s. It's a city that is characterized by waves of immigration. My family was among one of those waves. And I always had a sense of curiosity about how the city got to be the way it is today and what it's been like. Now that I'm in my middle age or beyond, I've seen the city at various points in its history. I go back. I grew up there in the 1950s and 1960s, and knew a city that has changed dramatically from its current state. But I've always treasured the history of the city, and I've had a career where I've been involved in urban studies, urban planning, real estate development, and maintained that curiosity in Paterson and its history.
And you're here in Lisburn as part of a wider tour of Ireland. Is it your first time?
It is my first time in Ireland. It's a place that looms large in America's imagination. Anybody who grew up in the United States has been exposed to Irish culture in one form or another, and every March 17th, we all celebrate and wear green and drink beer and have a great time, eat corned beef and cabbage, which is probably a whole lot different than the way you celebrate it here in the home country. But no matter what your ethnicity in the United States, at least for one day every year, you become Irish. And it's hard to grow up in the Northeast in the United States without being exposed to the remarkable Irish community that has emigrated from Ireland throughout the world. And so everyone has a connection in some way or another. Every American, I should say, has a connection in one way or another to Ireland. And as I got involved in this project of researching a really remarkable aspect of Paterson's history, I realized that if I was going to really understand the story, it would be great to come to Lisburn and see what the other half of the Barbour story, or the origin story of the Barbour family. So here I am.
Excellent. And you mentioned the Barbour family here. Obviously, they owned Hilden Mill, a well-known family in this area. But could you tell us how the Barbours ended up in the USA, and why did they choose Paterson, New Jersey, for their American business?
Well, the basic story is that the Barbours developed over I guess it's a 200-year period, a remarkable enterprise, beginning and at one point there were more sons that were available to operate a business than there were issues to operate a business here in Hilden. And they looked overseas to see if there was a chance for expansion into growing new markets. And in the 1860s, actually 1858, they came to New York. Two of the Barbour brothers, Thomas and Robert, came to New York to see if there could be this might be the chance to expand the business and link back to events here in Hilden. Initially, they worked for another. Thomas was really the pioneer and a very big thinker, a big man, a big personality, and a big thinker. Worked for another Hilden entrepreneur, and then wrote back to the family and said, "This really is an opportunity." And looked around for a site for a linen thread business in the United States, and came to, of all places, Paterson, New Jersey, which is the story in and of itself, and that's part of my talk tonight. Paterson was designed for industry, was planned for industry. It was a dream of Alexander Hamilton, who many of you have heard of, even here in Ireland, who was the Broadway-worthy founding father, and his intent was to balance the American economy from being a largely agricultural economy to an economy that included manufacturing. And he identified a number of industries where he thought America could succeed, and was particularly concerned about having the capacity in America to maintain its own defense without relying on European powers. And one of the industries that he identified in 1791 in the report on manufacturers to Congress was flax. Believe it or not, that was included in the list of products that he said America should produce and could produce. I don't think he anticipated the Barbours coming to Paterson quite a bit later, but it was a critical product that was needed in all kinds of aspects of manufacture, defense, saddlery, shoe manufacturing, netting, and as a result, Paterson was a very conducive home to the Barbours, and they quickly realized how appropriate and adequate and complementary the city was to their requirements, and they ended up building 3 very significant factories in Paterson, initially using water power that was part of the raceway system that was developed early in the 18th century, early in the 19th century in Paterson, and they found success. It became leading citizens in Paterson, built a very considerable fortune, became very influential in local affairs and local politics and local business beyond the linen thread business. They were land developers and bankers and overall entrepreneurial masterminds, and built a very successful business.
And one of those individuals that expanded beyond the linen thread business was, of course, Warren Barbour.
Correct.
The grandson of Thomas, the founder of the American business.
That's correct.
And he is someone you'll be focusing on in your talk tonight. Could you tell us briefly about his life and what drew you to study him?
Right. Warren Barbour's story is absolutely remarkable. It's an incredible story. And I became interested in the Warren Barbour story because I'm active in a local historical society that is our domain is the North Jersey Jewish community, and in going through some of our files and records, I found a newspaper column written by Senator Warren Barbour in 1943, expressing a a desire and a plea for tolerance of minorities of all kinds, tolerance for people of different ideas and backgrounds, tolerance for working together and keeping communities together. And it struck me, frankly, as a kind of an odd statement for a leading the descendant. He was a third generation American. Uh, it was an unusual, progressive, and open-minded call that you didn't really associate with mill owners and mill owning families, to be perfectly frank. And it piqued my interest. Who was Warren Barbour? What was he? How did he get there? What was his story? And through the organization that I am pleased to be a member of, we sponsored some research on Warren Barbour by a professional historian named Raphael Medoff, who helped us understand the background of Warren Barbour, his personal history. We were able to contact and we decided that it would be a worthwhile program to sponsor a program on Warren Barbour. We were fortunate to reach out to several of his descendants. We found 8 of his grandchildren who came to Paterson for the presentation. We were honored to award them recognition and appreciation certificates on behalf of the larger community, and that helped begin the process of raising the story of Warren Barbour, who, despite growing up in one of the most affluent families in New Jersey and in the United States, his parents were friendly with the leading business elite in the United States. Teddy Roosevelt was a personal friend. They had access to the leaders of the pro-business Republican Party that was a very powerful force. Warren Barbour, his story is remarkable. He declined to go to college. He passed down the opportunity to attend Princeton, to work in the family business. He unfortunately developed tuberculosis, went away for a while, and when he went away to a family estate of several thousand acres in the Adirondack Mountains. He certainly was ill, but it was hardly a hardship. He came back and it was somewhat out of shape. His parents really urged him to get into good condition. He became a very successful amateur boxer. Went to a boxing camp where he mastered the pugilistic arts, and then was entered into an amateur boxing tournament, which he won hands down, cleaned the clock of several very well established boxers, and suddenly this young man, who's the newspaper articles said would choke on his father's money, was a nationally prominent young man. And part of our story tonight, and I don't want to spill all the beans so that you lose interest, but he became thought of as the Great White Hope at a time when the boxing champion was Jack Johnson, who was seen as being unbeatable. Warren Barbour didn't pursue a fight didn't become the Great White Hope. Fortunately, it was a very charged title, and went to work in the business. But throughout his career in business and in politics, he displayed a caring for the underdog, a special consideration for the African American community in the United States, an unusual degree of connection to African Americans in New Jersey and in the United States. And later, in part of that whole movement towards tolerance, became very connected to the Jewish community and fought for emigration, opening the doors of emigration in countries that were persecuting religious and racial minorities into the United States. Unfortunately, he passed away. Although he introduced legislation, he passed away before it could be brought to the floor of the Senate. And that's a compelling story in my mind, and it's really something that needs to be told.
Yeah, a remarkable career, Richard. I'm looking forward to finding out more tonight.
Okay.
A final thought, final question. If some of our listeners were planning a trip to Paterson, what should they see? Is there anything remaining of the Barbours legacy? Architecture, museum collections. What's your thoughts?
Well, here's what you absolutely have to see. You have to come and see the Great Falls, which is what inspired Hamilton to found the city on the banks to harness that water power. There's a Barbour Street. There are Barbour remnants. The mills are all still standing. Some have been now converted into a school. The Paterson is not. I have to tell you that I am incredibly impressed with the work that you've done here in Lisburn in keeping the flame alive of the story of the linen industry, the great people and the everyday people. Both are celebrated here in this museum. There are pictures of the Barbours, oil portraits of these grand individuals, heroic entrepreneurs, but there's also a celebration of everyday life, of what it was like in the cottages and what early industry was like. We're not there yet. We're working on it. We've now become a national park. But for those of you who are interested in the linen industry, you're going to learn more here in Lisburn than you are in Paterson, unfortunately. And we made it we produced almost as much linen as you did in our later years. But you're way ahead of us in telling the story. You'll learn more about diverse manufacturing in Paterson. We made locomotives. We were the silk center, the Lyon of America, for many years. The Colt 45 revolving pistol was invented in Paterson, perfected elsewhere, but invented. So the airplane engine that Lindbergh took to fly across the Atlantic, made in Paterson. Diverse manufacturing was part of Paterson's story. And of course, you're going to be in the greater New York metropolitan area. Come look at Barbour Pond, look at Barbour Street, come and look at the Great Falls, drive by the Barbour Mills, visit the Paterson Museum, which is I have to say, not quite as impressive as events here, as the facilities here, but you'll get an appreciation for the dynamism of American entrepreneurship and capitalism and the grit of the American people and the story of immigration. But you've got a lot to be proud of right here, and it's really I don't know if I want to use the word envious, but I admire the cooperation that the public sector and the museum and the museum staff have shown to put this together.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard, for those comments, and hopefully we can continue to do the good work that we've been doing into the future. And you've given me a lot of food for thought about Paterson. I must start booking my trip.
All right, we'll be glad to have you when you come. Yeah, we'll be glad to show you around.
Great to chat to you, Richard, and looking forward to the talk now this evening.
Thank you.